The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the quiet as I pressed the phone to my ear, listening to it ring. I'd rehearsed my opening line, aiming for light, cheerful, and not at all needy. I just wanted a date. A simple, concrete date for my daughter's wedding. Hello? The voice was my son-in-law, Daniel. He sounded distracted. Daniel, it's Clara. Is Sophie around? I wanted to talk calendars for a minute about the wedding. There was a muffled sound, a hand over the receiver, and I could just barely make out his voice saying, "It's your mom." Again, then he was back, his tone shifting into something smoother, almost formal. Clara, actually, we've moved past the planning phase. We had the ceremony this past Saturday. It was exactly what we wanted, small, meaningful. Just the two of us and a few truly special people. Special people. The words didn't compute at first. They just floated in the space between the receiver and my ear. Then they landed with the force of a physical blow. Special people. I, who had been the guarantor on their lease, who had transferred $2,200 every month for the mortgage on a house I'd never spent a night in, who had written checks for furniture, for vacations they called necessary retreats, who stocked their pantry when times were too hectic to shop. I had not made that list. I was frozen in my own hallway, the patterned runner beneath my feet seeming to tilt. From where I stood, I could see into the sunlit living room. Sophie was sitting on the leather ottoman I'd bought them, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on a flaw in the hardwood floor. Daniel had settled into the wingback chair by the fireplace, his expression one of calm observation, watching me absorb the news. "Mom?" Sophie's voice was thin, strained through the speaker. She finally glanced up, her eyes skimming over me before darting away. It was spontaneous, an intimate courthouse thing. We didn't want anyone to feel obligated. It was a rehearsed line. I knew it instantly. The cadence was all wrong for her. It was Daniel's phrasing. My mind, treacherous and sharp, replayed the images I'd scrolled past on her profile just yesterday. A sunset glow filtering through what looked like stained glass, a cluster of hands holding delicate crystal flutes, a fleeting glimpse of an embroidered veil. I'd felt a warm rush, thinking she was sharing mood boards. Now I understood. They were clues to a party I hadn't been invited to. I placed the phone back in its cradle with a soft, final click. The silence it left behind was immense. My eyes traveled down the hall toward my closed bedroom door. Behind it, in my closet, hung a dress of a soft, elegant green color. I'd paid $350 for it, imagining how it would complement the gardens I assumed they'd choose. It had pockets perfect for holding a tissue during the vows, beside it, a pair of comfortable silver-lined shoes. They were all props for a scene that would never include me. In my desk drawer, secured with a rubber band, was $5,000 in saved cash, a gift meant to fund their honeymoon flights. My private planning had been a secret garden of hopes. I'd been researching caterers for a potential brunch, had tentatively marked a week off my own calendar, had even bought a new guest book just in case. That entire inner world, nurtured for months, was incinerated by Daniel's cool, deliberate words. Only special people? The phrase was a blade. It didn't just cut me out of a day, it cut me out of their narrative entirely, rewriting my role from mother to patron, a useful one but not a cherished one. I looked at Sophie, the child whose hair I'd braided for school, who now couldn't hold my gaze. A cold, solid feeling began to form in my core, cutting through the initial, dizzying pain. It was the sensation of a door, long left ajar on a draft of hope, finally slamming shut. The illusion was shattered, but the practical machinery of Clara's support was still running. What would happen when the first payment came due and the bank suddenly closed? For a week, I moved through my house like a ghost. The green-colored dress in my closet became a landmark of shame I couldn't bring myself to look at. I didn't cry, the hurt was too dense for tears. It sat in my chest like a stone, cold and heavy. Sophie called twice. I let the phone ring. Daniel texted a single, bland message, "Hope you're well." I deleted it. The silence was a vacuum, and on the 8th morning it was broken. The call came just after 9 a.m. It was Sophie, but her voice was unrecognizable, thin, strained, and layered with a performative panic I'd heard before. It was her emergency tone. "Mom, thank God you answered." She breathed the words out in a rush. "It's the mortgage, the payment bounced. The bank is saying they never received it. They're threatening penalties, and Daniel is saying they could even start foreclosure proceedings if we don't fix it this week. You must have forgotten the transfer." I was silent. I let the silence stretch out, listening to the faint staticky sound of her waiting on the other end. I remembered all the times I'd logged into my banking app at their frantic request. The times I'd postponed my own dental crown, my car's new tires, because their crisis was more immediate. The countless small denials, a new coat, a dinner out with friends, so the well of money for them wouldn't run dry. And now, after I had been formally, deliberately edited out of their lives as a non-special person, she was calling as if nothing had happened. As if my only function was to be a financial safety net that never questioned its place. "Sophie," I said, and my voice surprised me. It was calm, flat, and devoid of the old, eager warmth. "Didn't we just establish the new criteria?" Silence, deep, hollow silence. I could almost hear her confusion twisting into dawning comprehension. "Mom, what are you talking about, criteria? This is serious." "I'm being serious," I replied. "Last week, Daniel was very clear about the distinction between people. There are special people, and then there's everyone else. I believe his exact phrase was just the two of us and a few truly special people." I let the words hang, cruel and precise. "I'm calling to let you know I've decided to follow his excellent example. I only provide financial support to special people." The gasp on the other end was sharp, genuine. "Mom, you can't be serious, we're your family." "I'm your daughter? Are you?" The question left my lips before I could stop it, born from a well of pain I'd kept capped. Because a daughter might have wanted her mother at her wedding. A family doesn't hide its joy from its foundation. You and Daniel made your hierarchy perfectly clear. I'm simply respecting your boundaries. Her voice shifted, the panic morphing into a wheedling, childlike plea. "It was a misunderstanding. Daniel misspoke. We were stressed. Mom, please. We need $4,400 for this month and last month's late fee. You've always helped us." The word "always" was the final straw. It outlined the shape of my exploitation. I had always helped. And what had it gotten me? A closet full of useless green fabric and a soul full of quiet hurt. "That always ends today, Sophie," I said, my voice still terrifyingly even. "Consider this my retirement from your personal treasury. You and Daniel are both intelligent, capable adults with good jobs. I'm sure you'll figure it out. You'll have to." "Mom, don't do this. You'll regret this. You'll be alone." Her shriek was raw, stripped of all pretense, revealing the fury beneath the fear. The threat, once my deepest terror, now felt like a fact I had already accepted. "I think I already am," I said quietly. "Goodbye, Sophie." I ended the call. My hand was steady. The stone in my chest was still there, but it had transformed. It was no longer the cold weight of grief. It was the bedrock of resolve. Clara has drawn a line in the sand, but her daughter and son-in-law have built their lives on her side of it. What drastic measures will they take now that their funding has been cut off? The silence after hanging up was louder than Sophie's screams. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the morning sun casting a cheerful pattern on the floor that felt like a mockery. My hand was perfectly steady. A strange, electric clarity buzzed in my veins. For the first time in years, I had not just reacted to their demands. I had acted on my own behalf. The phone began to ring again immediately. Sophie's name flashed on the screen, a digital plea. I watched it, once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I picked it up not out of weakness but to establish a new rule. "Do not call me to scream, Sophie. It will not work. You have to listen to me." Her voice was a ragged mix of fury and disbelief. "Do you understand what you're doing? That's our home. You're on the paperwork. Your credit is tied to it? Then I suggest you and Daniel prioritize making the payment yourselves," I said, my tone pragmatic, as if discussing a stranger's utility bill. "My credit can survive a hit. My peace of mind, however, has reached its limit." "This is insane. You're being cruel over one little mistake." "A little mistake that cost me a place at my only child's wedding," I countered, the words still sharp but controlled. "We can define our relationship by your standards, Sophie. It seems, financially at least, I am no longer special to you. The feeling is becoming mutual." I ended the call again. This time I powered the phone off completely. The little device going dark felt symbolic, like shutting a heavy gate. For the next hour, I did not move from the kitchen table. I made a pot of strong coffee, not the cheap brand I'd bought to save money for them, but the expensive whole beans I enjoyed. The rich aroma filled the space, a small, deliberate luxury. As I drank, I did not think about their mortgage, their panic, or their anger. I thought about the last 3 years. It wasn't just the $2,200 monthly mortgage. It was the $15,000 for their kitchen renovation because the old one was depressing. The $8,000 for Daniel's Career Essential certification course he never finished. The $500 monthly grocery top-up. The vacations they called networking retreats. I had seen myself as a benefactor, a generous mother ensuring their comfort. Through the clarifying lens of my uninvitation, I now saw a ledger. And my column was overflowing with withdrawals while theirs held a single devastating entry, exclusion. The anger that came was clean, not messy. It was directed, not paralyzing. It was for myself, for the woman who had confused being needed with being loved. My first action was practical. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. The scheduled transfer for the mortgage payment, due in 3 days, glowed on the screen. My cursor hovered over it. For a moment, the old programming kicked in, a visceral fear of their disapproval, of being the cause of their hardship. I took a deep breath, inhaled the scent of my good coffee, and clicked cancel. The relief was instantaneous and profound. It was as if a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety I'd learned to live with had suddenly ceased. My next task was to leave the house. I needed to be somewhere they could not reach me, even in spirit. I drove to the Botanical Gardens, a place I loved but hadn't visited in years because the admission fee felt selfish. I walked for hours among the lush, quiet greenery. No one called me, no one needed money. The only demand was the beauty around me, and it asked for nothing in return. When I returned home in the late afternoon, a single car was parked across the street, Daniel's silver sedan. He was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at my house. He didn't get out, he didn't approach, he was just watching. A sentinel for a bank that had closed. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather went through me. This wasn't a plea, it was surveillance. The message was clear: this was not over. They were not going to accept their new financial reality quietly. The cold bedrock of my resolve hardened further. They had shown me who they were when they were happy and celebrating. Now I was going to see who they were when they were denied. I unlocked my front door, went inside, and did not look back out the window. I had drawn my line. Now I had to fortify my position. The quiet watch from across the street was only the beginning. Clara's financial withdrawal has triggered a silent alarm in her daughter's life. What is Daniel planning from his car, and what will happen when watchful waiting turns into action? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every passing car felt like a threat. Daniel's silent vigil had shifted something. This was no longer just a painful family rift. It was a cold war, and my home was the territory in dispute. By 6 a.m. I was dressed, the first pale light of dawn filtering through the blinds. My first stop was my bank, but not the local branch where I was known. I drove 20 minutes to a different location, a sleek glass building in a bustling plaza. I needed anonymity and a fresh start. The financial advisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Chen, listened without expression as I outlined my needs. Close all joint lines of credit, remove all authorized users, a status both Sophie and Daniel had enjoyed for emergencies, and transfer the bulk of my savings into a new, high-security account with no linked external access. This is a significant restructuring, Mrs. Henderson, Miss Chen said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. May I ask if you're experiencing any coercion? The question was a relief. I'm experiencing the cessation of coercion, I replied. I'm removing avenues for it. As she worked, my phone, turned back on out of necessity, buzzed incessantly in my purse, not just calls but a barrage of texts. Sophie. We're coming over, we need to talk. Daniel, Clara, this has gone far enough, we're involving a lawyer. Sophie, you're destroying our lives. Answer me. I showed the screen to Miss Chen. Her professional mask softened slightly. Would you like me to note these communications for your records? Harassment following the severing of financial ties can be relevant. Yes, I said, a new idea forming. Please? With the banking fortress secured, my next move was physical security. I went straight from the bank to a locksmith. Mr. Rossi, a burly man with kind eyes, took one look at my determined expression and listened. I need every exterior lock replaced with the highest grade deadbolts you have, I told him. And I need it done today. Having some trouble, ma'am? He asked gently as he took measurements. Let's just say I've recently learned who does and doesn't deserve a key to my life, I said. He nodded as if he'd heard it before. I can have a crew here by 1 p.m. We'll do front, back, garage, and the patio slider. I'd also recommend a camera for the front door. Basic model, connects to your phone, lets you see who's there before you even think about opening up. The word camera felt extreme, but the memory of Daniel parked across the street made it feel essential. Yes, install it. I returned home to wait for the locksmiths. The silence of the house was different now, not empty, but charged with purpose. I sat at my dining table with a notepad and began to document everything. I listed every monthly transfer, every gift, every large purchase I'd funded for them over the past 3 years with approximate dates and amounts. The total, even as a rough estimate, was staggering. It wasn't just money. It was years of my labor, my security, my future, all siphoned away with a smile and a promise of family. The crew arrived promptly at 1. The sound of drills and the scent of new metal were a symphony of reclamation. As Mr. Rossi's team worked, my doorbell rang. Through the sidelight, I saw Sophie and Daniel on the porch, their faces etched with fury and panic. I did not open the door. I watched as Sophie jabbed at the bell again, then began pounding on the wood. Mom, open this door, we know you're in there, we can hear the drills. Daniel peered through the window, his eyes meeting mine through the glass. His gaze was no longer that of a disapproving son-in-law, it was cold, calculating. He put a hand on Sophie's arm to stop her pounding and spoke clearly, knowing I could hear him through the door. Clara, this is childish. You are legally tied to the mortgage, you can't just walk away. Open the door and we can discuss this like reasonable adults before this gets ugly. A locksmith walked past me, a new heavy deadbolt in hand. I raised my voice so it would carry through the door. It already is ugly, Daniel. You made it ugly when you decided I wasn't a special person. We're done discussing. All future communication can go through my lawyer. The silence from the other side of the door was profound. I had used the magic word, lawyer. It changed the battlefield. They left without another word. But as the locksmiths finished their work and installed the small, discreet camera above my door, I knew it wasn't over. I had secured the gates, but the siege was just beginning. They had moved from begging to threatening to involving the law. I had my new locks, my new accounts, and my growing stack of documentation. I was no longer just a hurt mother. I was a defendant preparing a case. The new locks are on, but the first legal threat has been made. Clara has her fortress, but Sophie and Daniel are now mobilizing their own weapons. What will their first formal move be, and is Clara truly prepared for the legal war that's coming? The new locks were a physical comfort, but the silence that followed Daniel's lawyer threat was ominous. For 2 days, nothing happened. No calls, no texts, no cars idling across the street. It was the tense, breath-holding calm before a storm. I used it to prepare. On the 3rd morning, the storm arrived in a crisp, cream-colored envelope delivered by certified mail. I had to sign for it. My hand was steady as I took it from the postal worker, but my heart hammered against my ribs. I carried it to the kitchen table, the expensive paper feeling poisonous against my fingertips. It was from a law firm, Hartwell and Associates. The language was dense, formal, and utterly chilling. It stated that, on behalf of my daughter, Sophie Henderson Wright, and her husband, Daniel Wright, they were petitioning the court for a temporary conservatorship due to concerns about my recent erratic financial behavior and significant cognitive decline. They cited my sudden and unexplained severance of vital financial support and my isolation from concerned family as evidence of impaired judgment. The goal, to have Daniel appointed as temporary conservator to safeguard my assets and ensure my well-being. I read it twice. The first time, the words blurred into a nightmare. The second time, they crystallized into a breathtakingly cruel strategy. They weren't just trying to guilt or threaten me back into funding them. They were attempting to legally remove my right to control my own life. The phrase cognitive decline burned. All those years of managing budgets, of running a household alone, of being the reliable one, reduced to a symptom of dementia by the very people who had profited from my competence. The anger that rose was pure and scorching. It burned away the last remnants of confusion and guilt. This was a declaration of war. I didn't wait. I drove directly to the office of Thomas Brennan, an attorney Margaret, my old friend, had urgently recommended. His practice specialized in elder law and asset protection. His office was quiet, lined with books, and he himself was a man in his 60s with calm, keen eyes. He read the petition slowly, then looked up at me. Clara, this is severe. But it's also a common tactic in cases of financial exploitation. They're trying to pathologize your reasonable self-defense. Can they win? My voice was tighter than I wanted it to be. Not if we act decisively, he said, steepling his fingers. Their case is built on a house of cards, but we need to knock it down systematically. First, we file a forceful objection. Second, we get ahead of their cognitive decline narrative. I want you to undergo a full neuropsychological evaluation with a specialist I trust, Dr. Evans. Her assessment will be ironclad. Third, we document everything. The financial history, the wedding exclusion, the harassment. He took a notepad. Now tell me about this wedding, leave no detail out. For an hour, I talked. I told him about the green dress, the saved honeymoon cash, the social media clues I'd ignored. I showed him the screenshot I'd finally taken of Sophie's champagne flute post, the date stamp clear. I gave him my notepad with the financial ledger. Mr. Brennan listened, nodding occasionally, his pen scratching. The wedding is key, he said finally. It establishes their pattern of deliberate exclusion and emotional manipulation immediately prior to your erratic financial decision. It proves motive. Their motive? As I left his office armed with a list of tasks and the card for Dr. Evans, I felt a shift. The fear was still there, but it was being crowded out by a focused determination. I was no longer just a victim. I was a client with a strategy. My phone buzzed as I got into my car, an unknown number. I answered, my voice cool. Hello, Mrs. Henderson, this is Alicia from Golden Years Home Care. We're calling to schedule your initial wellness assessment as requested by your family. They were moving fast. The legal petition was one front, this was another, creating a paper trail of concern through third parties. There has been a mistake, I said, my tone firm. I have not requested any assessment and I do not consent to one. Any further contact regarding my well-being should be directed to my attorney, Thomas Brennan. I gave her the office number before ending the call. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel. They were orchestrating a full campaign to paint me as a confused, fragile old woman who needed to be saved from herself. The audacity was stunning. The little old woman they were trying to create wouldn't have the presence of mind to hire a bulldog like Brennan. The little old woman they imagined would have opened the door when they pounded on it. I started the car. I had an appointment to schedule with a neuropsychologist. I had a war to fight. And for the first time, I felt a grim certainty that I would win it. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my generosity for weakness and my love for stupidity. They were about to learn the cost of that mistake. The legal battle lines are drawn, but Sophie and Daniel are attacking on multiple fronts: legal, medical, and psychological. Clara has her lawyer, but can she withstand the coming pressure designed to make her look incompetent? What will the neuropsychologist's evaluation reveal? The neuropsychological evaluation with Dr. Evans was exhausting. For 4 hours, I was tested on everything from memory recall and complex problem solving to spatial reasoning and emotional processing. I drew clocks, repeated strings of numbers backwards, interpreted proverbs, and described social scenarios. It was mentally grueling, but with each test, my resolve hardened. This was my battlefield, and I would not fail. Dr. Evans, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and intelligent eyes, gave nothing away. As I left, the formal results pending, the vulnerability of the process washed over me. My own mind was now evidence. Mr. Brennan's strategy moved on a second front. We need character witnesses, he said during our follow-up call. People who can attest to your sound judgment both before and after you cut off the money. It undermines their sudden decline narrative. The only person I could think of was Margaret, but we'd been out of close touch for years, the casualty of my single-minded focus on Sophie. Then I remembered my neighbor Evelyn from 3 doors down. We weren't friends, but we'd exchanged pleasantries for a decade. She'd once complimented my roses. It was a thin thread, but I had to start somewhere. Gathering a small basket of lemons from my tree, I walked to her house. When she answered, she looked surprised, then concerned. Clara, is everything all right? I've seen some commotion at your place. That was my opening. May I come in, Evelyn? I could use some advice. Over tea in her sunny kitchen, I told her the bones of it, the wedding, the money, the lawyers. I kept it factual, unemotional. When I finished, she shook her head slowly, her expression a mixture of sadness and anger. I wondered, she said softly. I'd see that sleek car of theirs in your driveway every month like clockwork, and you always looked tired. I thought you were just lonely, but it was more than that, wasn't it? They were draining you. Her perception was a balm. They're trying to say I'm not in my right mind for stopping the payments, I said. Evelyn snorted. Sounds like the sanest thing you've done in years. Of course I'll speak for you, and you should talk to Ben Miller at the end of the cul-de-sac. He's a retired accountant. He mentioned once he thought you were being taken for a ride, but it wasn't his place to say. That afternoon, I met Ben on his porch. He was direct. Saw you hauling a new washing machine into your car last year, then the next week the boy was loading a brand new one into his truck. Did the math, it didn't add up. I'll testify that your financial judgment from an outside perspective seemed compromised then, not now. I was building my army one neighbor at a time. The next day, the first concrete blow from the other side landed. I received a call from my home insurance company. We're conducting a routine review, the agent said. We've received an anonymous tip about unsafe conditions at the property, specifically concerns about hoarding and electrical hazards that could constitute a fire risk. We need to schedule an inspection. My blood ran cold. Hoarding, electrical hazards? This was a new, insidious tactic. A failed inspection could threaten my policy or even mandate costly repairs. It was harassment disguised as bureaucracy. I have no unsafe conditions, I stated, my voice tight. This is malicious. I will have my attorney contact you to provide evidence that this is part of a coordinated campaign of harassment. I called Mr. Brennan immediately. They're going after your home now, he said grimly. It's another way to pressure you and create a document suggesting instability. Schedule the inspection. We'll have a professional electrician and a home organizer there at the same time as their inspector. We'll turn their trap into proof of your competence. The following Tuesday, my house underwent the strangest inspection of its life. A dour man from the insurance company poked around, clipboard in hand, while a cheerful, licensed electrician I'd hired followed him, offering unsolicited commentary on the excellent condition of my wiring. A professional organizer I'd enlisted for the day stood by, her presence alone a rebuttal to the hoarding claim. The insurance inspector left quickly, visibly annoyed. That evening, as I reviewed the electrician's flawless report, my doorbell rang. The camera feed showed a woman in a sensible suit. I didn't recognize her. I opened the door but kept the chain engaged. Clara Henderson, I'm Catherine Moore from Adult Protective Services. We've received a report expressing concern for your welfare and self-neglect. May I come in to speak with you? They had opened a third front. The law, the insurance, and now the social safety net. They were throwing everything at me, hoping something would stick and crack my defense open. I met her gaze through the gap in the door. Miss Moore, I have been expecting you. Please direct all inquiries to my attorney, Thomas Brennan. Any report you have received is fraudulent, part of an attempted financial exploitation by my family. I am documenting this visit as further harassment. I closed the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from fury. They were trying to bury me under an avalanche of official concern, to smother me with paperwork and inspections until I surrendered or was declared incapable. But with each attack, my position grew stronger. I had a lawyer. I had witnesses. I had reports, and I had a clean bill of health from an electrician. The siege was intensifying, but my walls were holding. Clara is under assault from multiple angles: legal, insurance, and now social services. She's countering each move, but the pressure is relentless. What drastic step will Sophie and Daniel take when these indirect attacks fail to break her? 2 days after the APS visit, Dr. Evans's report arrived. Mr. Brennan summarized it for me over the phone, a note of triumph in his usually measured voice. It's perfect, Clara. Cognitive function superior to average for age cohort. Exceptional financial literacy and decision-making capacity. No indication of impairment, decline, or dementia. This document doesn't just defend you. It eviscerates their entire petition. A weight I hadn't fully acknowledged lifted from my shoulders. My own mind was now my ally, officially and professionally. The court date for the conservatorship petition is in 10 days, Brennan continued. With this, their case collapses, but stay vigilant. People this desperate don't just give up when one plan fails. His warning proved prophetic sooner than either of us expected. That evening, as I was reviewing our legal filings, a sharp knock echoed through the house, not on the front door, but on the back patio slider. I froze. The camera only covered the front. Heart pounding, I peered around the edge of the living room curtain. Daniel was on my patio, his face pressed close to the glass, cupping his hands around his eyes to see inside. Sophie stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed, looking not at the house but at my neatly trimmed garden as if assessing its value. A hot rush of violation swept through me. This was beyond mail and phone calls. This was a physical invasion. I didn't scream or confront them. Instead, I picked up my phone, opened the camera app, and began recording, zooming in on Daniel's intrusive posture, on Sophie's cold assessment of my property. I then dialed 911, my voice low and clear. Yes, I'd like to report a trespass. 2 individuals are on my enclosed back patio, attempting to look into my home. I have changed the locks recently and they do not have permission to be here. Yes, I feel threatened. I gave the address and stayed on the line, continuing to record. Daniel must have heard the murmur of my voice. He stepped back from the glass, his eyes widening slightly when he saw the phone pointed at him. He said something to Sophie and her head snapped toward me. The look she gave me through the window was pure, undiluted hatred. It was the final shred of the mask, gone. They were off the patio and around the side of the house by the time the police cruiser arrived 5 minutes later. I met the officers at the front door, video evidence ready. I showed them the new locks, explained the ongoing legal dispute and the financial exploitation, and presented the trespassing video. One officer, a woman with a kind but weary face, nodded as she took notes. We'll find them, have a word, and issue a formal warning. This, with your pending court case, should be enough for a temporary restraining order. Do you want to press charges? Not yet, I said. But I want the incident documented, officially? Smart, she said. The official police report was emailed to me and Mr. Brennan by morning. It was a dry, factual account, but the word trespass and claimed to be family but denied entry by homeowner were legal poetry. Brennan filed for the restraining order immediately. This is a gift, he said. It shows a pattern of escalation and intimidation which works beautifully against their loving, concerned family image. The court date arrived. I wore a simple navy blue suit, not the green dress. I wanted to project competence, not nostalgia. Sophie and Daniel were already there with their lawyer, a man in an excessively sharp suit who exuded a slick confidence. Sophie avoided my eyes. Daniel's gaze was a steady, challenging glare until he noticed Mr. Brennan, then his confidence seemed to flicker. The hearing was shockingly swift. Their lawyer presented his case. The distressed family, the sudden financial abandonment, the isolation. He painted a picture of a confused woman being manipulated by a greedy attorney. Then it was our turn. Mr. Brennan was methodical and devastating. He submitted Dr. Evans's report. He entered the financial ledger into evidence. He referenced the police report for trespassing. Finally, he brought up the wedding. Your Honor, Brennan said, his voice resonating in the quiet room. The petitioners claim my client's decision to stop funding their lifestyle was sudden and erratic. It was not. It was a direct, rational response to a profound emotional and familial betrayal. He held up the screenshot of Sophie's social media post. Weeks after this celebration, to which my client was pointedly not invited despite funding the very life being celebrated, they demanded their next mortgage payment. When she declined, citing their own standard of special people, this legal campaign began. This is not about concern. It is about retaliation and financial entitlement. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, looked from the social media printout to Sophie and Daniel. You held a wedding and excluded your mother? She asked, her tone icy. Sophie flushed. It was small, Your Honor, just... Was the mother who paid your mortgage for 3 years considered small in your life, or was she simply not considered at all? The judge interrupted. Daniel leaned forward. Your Honor, that's a private family matter. We're here about her mental capacity. And I have a professional evaluation stating her capacity is excellent, the judge said, tapping Dr. Evans's report. What I see is capacity being used to set a long overdue boundary. Petition for temporary conservatorship denied. Restraining order granted for 6 months. You are to stay 100 yards from the petitioner, her home, and her vehicle. The gavel cracked. It was over in minutes. Outside the courthouse, their lawyer walked ahead, already on his phone. Sophie finally looked at me, her eyes red. Happy now? You've ruined everything. No, Sophie, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the morning air. You did that when you decided my only value was monetary. Now you get to live in the world you built. I turned and walked away with Mr. Brennan. I had won the battle. But as I got into my car alone, the hollow echo of the victory settled in. I had proven I was sane. I had proven I was right. But the daughter I had loved was gone, replaced by this furious stranger. The war for my finances was over. The longer, quieter war with my grief was just beginning. Clara has won a decisive legal victory, but the emotional cost is immense. With the restraining order in place, what will Sophie and Daniel do next from a distance? And how will Clara begin to fill the void left in her life now that the fight has defined her for so long? The silence after the court victory was profound, but it was not peaceful. It was the silence of a field after a battle, littered with debris and echoing with absence. The restraining order was a paper wall, and while it provided legal safety, it did nothing to mend the raw, weeping wound where my relationship with my daughter had been severed. For a week, I moved through my days with a mechanical precision. I gardened. I cooked elaborate meals I had no appetite for. I organized closets that were already tidy. The focused fury that had fueled me was gone, leaving behind a deep, aching fatigue. I had won, and in winning, I had lost everything I thought I had. Mr. Brennan called to check in. The order is solid, Clara. But be aware, this kind of rejection can trigger more desperate behavior. They may try to contact you through intermediaries or escalate in other non-physical ways. Keep your camera charged. His words were a cold reminder. The war might have entered a new phase, but it wasn't over. The first sign came via email. A message from an address I didn't recognize with the subject line, "A plea from your grandchild." My breath hitched. I opened it. It was from Sophie. Mom, I'm writing this because I'm not allowed to call. I know you hate me. I know you think I'm a monster, but I'm still your daughter. And you're going to be a grandmother. I'm 8 weeks pregnant. Is this how you want it to be? Your grandchild growing up knowing their grandmother had their parents taken to court? That she wants nothing to do with them? We made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But this is a chance for a new start for all of us. The pregnancy is high risk. The stress of the lawsuit, of the financial uncertainty, my doctor is very concerned. We need stability, we need help, for the baby's sake. Please, Mom, don't punish an innocent child for our errors. We can fix this. We can be a family again. All I'm asking for is a chance to talk. And for a little help to ensure your grandchild has a safe home to come home to. Love, Sophie, the words swam before my eyes. A grandchild. The one thing I had secretly, desperately longed for even as my own family fell apart. A fresh start. The hook was exquisitely baited, appealing to every lonely, hopeful, guilt-ridden part of my heart. For hours, I was paralyzed. I imagined a baby's tiny hand, Sophie's tired but happy smile, a reconciliation that erased the bitterness. I could fix it. I could write a check and the door would open again. The green dress could finally be worn to a christening. But then I remembered the calculated chill in Daniel's eyes on my patio, the rehearsed line about the wedding, the phrase special people, the words cognitive decline on legal paper. I read the email again. Not with my heart, but with the cold, analytical mind Dr. Evans had certified. The timing was too perfect, arriving just after their legal defeat. The language was manipulative. Punish an innocent child, high risk, for the baby's sake. It was emotional blackmail upgraded to a new generation. They weren't offering love, they were offering a transaction. Access to a grandchild in exchange for the reinstatement of funding. The pain was exquisite. It felt like losing Sophie all over again and losing a phantom future simultaneously. I closed the laptop. I didn't reply. The next day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a tiny, yellow baby onesie. A note card was tucked inside in Sophie's handwriting, "Just thinking of you." Roman 20, it was a tangible grenade of sentiment. I held the soft cotton and a sob ripped from my throat. This was so much harder than the lawyers and the trespassing. This was a war for my soul. I called Evelyn. I needed a voice from outside the battlefield. I showed her the email and the onesie without speaking. She read the email, her lips pressed into a thin line. She held the little garment, then placed it gently back in the box. "Clara," she said softly. A good mother, a good grandmother wants what's healthiest for a child. What is healthiest for this baby? To be used as a bargaining chip, to be born into a dynamic where love is conditional on money. You stepping back isn't punishment. It might be the only healthy boundary that baby will ever have. Her words were a lifeline. She was right. If there even was a baby, funding its parents' life under threat and manipulation was not love. It was further entrapment. I drafted a reply. It took all my strength. Sophie, if you are pregnant, I wish for you and the baby health and peace. But a family cannot be rebuilt with a check. A grandchild cannot be a conduit for transactions. The conditions for a relationship are simple: mutual respect, honesty, and presence without price. Until you and Daniel can offer that, without demands, without lawsuits, without manipulation, I cannot be in your lives. My decision stands. Do not contact me again about money. Clara, I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The act felt like amputating a gangrenous limb, horrific but necessary for survival. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared. It was Daniel, his voice low and venomous, stripped of all pretense. You cold bitch. You'd really abandon your own flesh and blood. You think you've won? You haven't. You're just alone, and you'll die alone. I saved the voicemail. I forwarded it to Mr. Brennan. It was no longer just a sad ending. It was more evidence. The mask was not just off. It had been shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. I placed the tiny yellow onesie in a box, put the lid on it, and stored it in the back of a closet. It was a symbol of a future that might never be, and a pain I would have to learn to carry. The battlefield had shifted inward. I had defended my bank account and my home. Now I had to defend my heart against the most potent weapon of all, a hope I knew was false. Clara has resisted the ultimate emotional blackmail, but the threat of a grandchild changes everything. With this new, heartbreaking layer to the conflict, what will Sophie and Daniel's next move be? And how will Clara protect herself from the grief that threatens to undermine her hard-won strength? The week after I sent the email was a fog of grief. Daniel's voicemail echoed in my head, a toxic refrain, "You'll die alone." The words found their target, amplifying the silence of my house into a roar. The little yellow onesie in the closet felt less like a symbol and more like a ghost. I realized I couldn't just defend anymore. I had to build something new, something they couldn't touch. The idea came to me not as a grand plan, but as a simple, practical need. To be around people who didn't want anything from me. Remembering Ben Miller's no-nonsense decency, I walked to his house. He was tinkering under the hood of his old sedan. "Ben," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You mentioned you thought I was being taken for a ride. I was. For years, it stopped. Now I have time and I'd like to be useful. Does anyone around here need help they can't afford to pay for?" He straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag, and studied me. After a moment, he nodded. "My wife's sister, Gloria, she's 84, lives over on Elm. Her eyesight's failing. She's proud, hates charity, but she's struggling with her bills and paperwork. The kind of thing that gets people preyed upon. She could use a sharp pair of eyes and someone honest." That afternoon, I met Gloria. She was tiny, bird-like, and suspicious. "Ben says you're not a con artist," she said bluntly from her doorway. "I've recently learned to spot con artists," I replied. "I'd like to help if you'll let me." I started by simply organizing her mail. Then, with her permission, I helped her set up a simple system to track her medications. I didn't offer money, I offered order. Slowly, her suspicion thawed. One day, she made us both tea and told me about her husband, gone 20 years. "He was a good man," she said. "Not perfect, but he never made me feel small." The word small resonated deeply. That's exactly how Sophie and Daniel had made me feel. Helping Gloria gave my days a spine, but the legal and financial threats hadn't vanished. Mr. Brennan called. "They've defaulted on the mortgage," he said. "The bank is pursuing both them and you as the cosigner. They've also run up the joint credit cards to the limit before we closed them. The debts are coming due." The news was a cold shock followed by a hotter rage. Their final act wasn't just to walk away, it was to salt the earth behind them. What are my options? We fight the bank on the mortgage default, arguing undue influence and your status as a victim of financial abuse. It's not a guarantee, but it's leverage. The credit card debt is trickier. You're liable, we can settle, but it will cost you. The cost wasn't just financial. It was the final, galling invoice for my own naivete. I'd have to pay for the privilege of having been used. Do it, I said, my voice hollow. Settle what you can and fight the bank. A few days later, a different kind of letter arrived, this one from a local community college. It was a brochure for their lifelong learning program circled in a class called Reclaiming Your Narrative, Memoir Writing for Women. A post-it note was stuck to it in Evelyn's handwriting. Thought you might have a story to tell. No pressure. It felt like a rope thrown into the pit I was in. I enrolled. The first class was in a sunlit room with a dozen other women, all of varying ages. The instructor asked us to write for 10 minutes about a turning point. I didn't write about the wedding or the lawsuit. I wrote about buying the green dress, the hope in the choosing, the silken feel of the fabric, the way I'd stood before my mirror and imagined a day filled with light and love. When it was time to share, my voice shook, but I read it. The room was quiet when I finished. A woman named Anya, who was maybe 50, reached over and squeezed my hand. That dress deserved its day, she said quietly. I'm sorry it didn't get it. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged the loss, not the conflict. I didn't cry in class, but I did in my car afterwards, clean, releasing tears, not the strangled sobs of before. I was building a new life brick by brick. Gloria's pragmatic friendship, Evelyn's thoughtful support, the silent solidarity of the writing class. It was fragile, but it was mine. Then the past fired one last, indirect shot. I received a Facebook message from a woman I didn't know. Hi Clara, I'm a friend of Sophie's. I don't want to get in the middle, but I'm worried about her. She's not doing well since the falling out. She's talking about moving out of state, saying there's nothing left for her here. I just thought you should know. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive gossip designed to make me feel like the destroyer of my daughter's life. The guilt tried to rise, a familiar tide. But I looked around, at the memoir notebook on my table, at the list of Gloria's medications I'd neatly typed, at the secure, quiet space of my home. I didn't reply. I deleted the message and blocked the sender. I recognized the tactic now, sending emotional drones to scout for weakness. The siege wasn't over, but I was no longer just inside the fortress. I was outside, planting a garden in no man's land. They could try to bombard the empty walls. I was no longer solely defined by what I was defending against. I was beginning to be defined by what I was building toward. Clara is constructing a new life from the rubble of the old, but the financial bombshell of the defaulted mortgage and maxed-out cards is a devastating blow. Can she legally fight the bank? And as she finds new purpose, will the reported news of Sophie's despair be the one thing that finally cracks her resolve? The financial reckoning was a harsh, unemotional business. Mr. Brennan negotiated with the credit card companies, settling the debts for 60 cents on the dollar. The check I wrote to cover it was the most expensive of my life, paying for my own lesson in codependency. The mortgage fight with the bank was ongoing, a slow grind of paperwork and legal arguments. But my life, the one I was living day to day, had quietly transformed. My Tuesday afternoons with Gloria were a highlight. We had graduated from bills to pie recipes. Her hands, gnarled with arthritis, guided mine through her late mother's crust technique. Flour dusted her sunlit kitchen, and for those hours the only currency was patience and shared memory. My writing class had become my sanctuary. Anya, the woman who'd spoken about my dress, had become a friend. We started having coffee after class. She was a graphic designer divorced with a son in college. We never probed each other's wounds, but their shapes became familiar. One day she saw me glancing at my phone after another unknown number tried to call. "The ghosts still calling?" she asked simply. "Trying to," I said. "Block them. Then write about them, turn their poison into your ink." I took her advice. I began writing not about the pain, but about the before. I wrote about Sophie as a little girl, planting marigold seeds with me, her small hands patting the dirt with immense seriousness. The act of writing those moments didn't erase the present. It simply reclaimed the past from the shadow of the present betrayal. The past was mine again. Evelyn and Ben became my informal neighborhood watch. Evelyn would text me photos of suspicious vehicles, and Ben, with his military precision, noted license plates. It was overkill, perhaps, but it made me feel less alone on the front lines. The first true test of my new equilibrium came on a rainy Thursday. I was leaving the supermarket when I saw them. Sophie and Daniel were 2 checkouts over, loading bags into their cart. She was wearing a loose sweatshirt. I found my eyes scanning for a curve, a sign. I saw none, but the doubt was a physical ache. Daniel looked up. Our eyes met across the crowded aisle. The restraining order mandated distance, but it couldn't mandate the electric jolt of recognition, the sheer strangeness of seeing your own child as a hostile entity in the cereal aisle. Sophie followed his gaze. She saw me. Her face, for a fleeting second, was unguarded, a wash of what looked like shock and a profound, childlike sadness. Then Daniel leaned down and said something to her. Her expression shut down, hardening into the familiar mask of resentment. She turned her back deliberately and pushed the cart toward the exit. I stood, gripping my own cart, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The encounter lasted less than 10 seconds, but it unraveled me. The ghost in the aisle was more real than any email or voicemail. She was here, she was pregnant, maybe, and she hated me. I drove home in a daze. The old scripts played in my head. I could just talk to her. I could wave the white flag. Maybe the baby is real. Maybe this is all a terrible misunderstanding. The pull was magnetic, a deep biological gravity. I walked into my house, the silence accusing me. I went to my closet, opened the box, and took out the yellow onesie. I held it, the soft cotton now feeling like a weaponized symbol. Then I looked at my desk. On it lay the latest chapter from my writing class. A story about teaching Sophie to ride a bike, the thrill of letting go of the seat, the glorious, wobbly independence, the crash that followed, the tears, the band-aid, the getting back on. I had written about the scraped knee, but also about the fierce pride in her eyes when she finally pedaled away on her own. That was the true story, not this stalemate in a grocery aisle. I put the onesie back. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Sophie, I called Anya. I saw her, I said, my voice raw. Are you okay? No, but I will be. Can you meet me for coffee? I don't want to think about it. Tell me about your son's latest project instead. Anya didn't ask for details. Give me 20 minutes. That choice to reach for a new friend instead of obsessing over the old wound felt more significant than any court victory. I was learning to reroute my neural pathways away from the drama of Sophie and Daniel and towards something sustainable. Later that week, Mr. Brennan had news. The bank, he said. They're dropping the pursuit against you for the mortgage default. They're going after Sophie and Daniel solely. Our argument about undue influence held. They've also been served with the debt collection for the credit cards. They're underwater, Clara. Completely. There was no triumph in the news, only a grim finality. Their financial house of cards, built on my money, had collapsed. The consequences were now entirely theirs. My liability, at least for the house, was over. I hung up and looked out at my garden. The marigolds Sophie and I had once planted had reseeded themselves years ago, coming up volunteer every summer. They were blooming now, a defiant burst of orange against the green. They didn't need me to tend them anymore, they just grew. I had stopped the bleeding of my money. I was learning to staunch the bleeding of my grief. The war, it seemed, was reaching a grim, exhausted end. Not with reconciliation, but with a silent, separate peace. But peace, I was learning, is not a destination. It's a daily practice of choosing your own company over your ghosts. The financial threat is finally neutralized, and Clara is building a new community. But the haunting grocery store encounter proves the emotional battle is ongoing. With Sophie and Daniel facing financial ruin, will their desperation lead to one final, unpredictable act? And can Clara's fragile new peace survive it? The separate peace was a fragile thing. Knowing Sophie and Daniel were drowning financially was a cold comfort. It didn't fill the hollow space where a daughter should have been, it just made the landscape of our estrangement more desolate. I focused on my routines, Gloria's pies, my writing class, coffee with Anya. I was building a life, but some nights the quiet was an immense, echoing room. Then the letter came. Not certified, just ordinary mail in a plain envelope, but the handwriting was Sophie's. My name was written with a hesitancy I remembered from her childhood thank you notes. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no salutation. I'm writing this because I don't know who else to tell. Daniel left. A week ago. He took what was left in our account and I haven't heard from him since. The bank is foreclosing. I have to be out in 30 days. I'm staying with a friend. The pregnancy is real. I'm showing now. It's a girl. I know you don't believe me. I know you have no reason to. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know he's gone. And that I'm sorry for all of it. Not because of this, but because of before. The wedding. The lies. The things we said. The lawyer. All of it. It was never about you not being special, it was about us being ashamed. Ashamed we still needed you. Ashamed we weren't the adults we pretended to be, so we made you small to make ourselves feel bigger. I don't expect a reply, I just needed to say it. Sophie, the paper trembled in my hands. The words were stark, devoid of manipulation, absent of any request. They felt true. The confession of shame rang with a painful clarity I recognized. It was the first thing she'd ever said that explained instead of excused. The news of Daniel's abandonment hit me with a surprising force. Not sympathy for him, but a fierce maternal pang for Sophie. However angry I was, the image of her, pregnant, abandoned, facing homelessness, was a physical blow. And the baby, a girl? I read the letter 5 times, looking for hooks, for hidden pleas, for the subtle manipulation I was now an expert in detecting. I found none. There was only a bleak, unadorned accounting of disaster and a raw, unfinished apology. I didn't know what to do. The part of me that had been trained over the last few months screamed, "This is a trap, the ultimate guilt play, she's circling back because she has nowhere else to go." That voice had kept me safe. But the older, deeper part of me, the mother who remembered teaching her to ride a bike, who knew the sound of her childhood laughter, that part wept. I didn't reply that day or the next. I carried the letter with me, a secret weight. At my writing class, the prompt was an unanswered letter. My pen froze over the page. Anya glanced at me, her eyes asking a silent question. I just shook my head. I called Mr. Brennan. I read him the letter. He was silent for a long moment. "Clara, it could be genuine. It also could be the most sophisticated play yet. Desperate people are capable of both profound honesty and profound deception. My legal advice remains. Do not engage without protection. Any contact could be used to argue the restraining order is no longer necessary or to establish a new basis for financial claims." "What would you do?" I asked, my voice small. "I'm not your mother," he said gently. "But if you choose to respond, do so through me. Keep a documented arm's-length channel. Do not meet alone. Do not promise anything." Arm's length. It was the right, safe, smart approach. It also felt like administering first aid with sterile gloves from behind a shield. This was my child. That weekend, I was at Gloria's rolling out pie dough. My hands were busy, but my mind was miles away. "You're somewhere else today, Clara," Gloria said, her clouded eyes still perceptive. "My daughter," I said, the words surprising me. "She's in trouble." "The one who took you to court?" I nodded. Gloria was quiet, kneading her own dough. "Trouble has a way of stripping things down to the truth," she said finally. "When my Arthur got sick near the end, all the petty arguments we'd carried for years, they just vanished. Only the essential was left. Sometimes you have to let people hit bottom to see what they're really made of. And sometimes you have to let yourself see it." Let herself see it. Not as a strategist, not as a victim, but as a witness. I went home and wrote a letter. Not to Sophie, but for myself. I wrote about the marigolds, the bike, the green dress hanging in the closet. I wrote about the shame I'd felt too, the shame of believing money was the only language of love I had left to speak. I filled 3 pages, then I put them away. I composed a text to the number I had for Mr. Brennan's paralegal. "Please relay a message to Sophie Henderson Wright. I have received your letter, I need time." It was not forgiveness. It was not help, it was not a reopening of doors. It was merely an acknowledgement of receipt, a tiny, neutral point of contact in the void. But it was the first thing I had offered in months that wasn't a no. It was a pause. The reply, relayed back through the paralegal an hour later, was just as brief. "Okay, thank you." 2 words. They didn't change the past. They didn't secure the future. But they altered the quality of the silence between us. It was no longer the silence of a wall. It was the silence of a vast, damaged space where 2 voices had just echoed, however faintly. I looked at the green dress in my closet. It wasn't a symbol of loss anymore. It was just a dress. A beautiful, unworn dress. Perhaps I thought I would wear it somewhere just for me. The battle for survival was over. The more complicated journey of what came next, forgiveness, boundaries, a new kind of love, was just beginning. And I had no map. A crack has appeared in the wall of estrangement with a letter that feels tragically genuine. Clara has offered a thread of contact, but Daniel is gone and Sophie is facing motherhood alone and destitute. How will Clara navigate this new, treacherous terrain between self-preservation and the pull of family? The thread of contact remained thin and fragile for weeks. No more letters came. The paralegal relayed no new messages. It was as if Sophie had said what she needed to say and then retreated into the chaos of her own life. The silence now was different, charged not with hostility but with a terrible, unresolved waiting. I wore the green dress, not to a special event but on a Tuesday. I put it on, did my hair, and went to a nice cafe downtown with Anya. She whistled softly when she saw me. "Now that's a dress that deserves to be seen," she said. We talked about everything except what the dress had originally been for. It felt like an exorcism. Life moved forward in its new shape. I volunteered more regularly at a local senior center, helping with bookkeeping, using my meticulously kept financial skills for something that felt clean and good. The director, impressed, offered me a small, paid position. It wasn't about the money, it was about the value, externally recognized and separate from family. One afternoon, returning from the center, I found a small cardboard box on my front porch. No note, inside, carefully wrapped, was a porcelain music box I recognized instantly. It had been mine as a child, a tinkling ballet dancer inside. I'd given it to Sophie when she was 5. The paint was chipped now and the dancer was still. This wasn't a threat or a plea, it was a relic, a surrender of something that had once been a token of love between us. It felt like an ending. 2 days later, Mr. Brennan called. "Sophie has filed for divorce," he said. "Full dissolution. She's also filed a police report against Daniel for financial abandonment. She's using the systems for real now, not as a weapon." "It's a positive sign. Where is she living?" I heard myself ask. According to the filing, a women's shelter, she listed it as her address. The words women's shelter landed in my gut like a stone. All the legal victory, all my fortified peace tasted like ash. My pregnant daughter, was in a shelter. I didn't act impulsively. I sat with the information for a full day. I thought of Gloria's words about seeing what people are made of when they hit bottom. Sophie was at her bottom, and she was using her energy to file legal papers, not to send me manipulative emails. She was fighting her own battles. After consulting with Mr. Brennan, I sent a message through the established channel. It was not from mother to daughter. It was from one adult to another through a legal intermediary. "If you are willing, I would like to meet. One time in a public place, my attorney will be present. The purpose is to discuss one matter only, the safe delivery and care of your child, my potential grandchild. No past, no money." Just that. It was the hardest line I had ever drawn, offering a connection that was explicitly limited, conditional, and observed. It was not the open-armed reconciliation of fantasy. It was a possible first step on a new, uncharted path, taken with every possible protection in place. The agreed-upon meeting was at a quiet tea shop at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Mr. Brennan sat at a separate table nearby, a discreet sentinel. My hands were ice cold. She came in alone. She was visibly pregnant now, a soft swell under a simple, worn dress. She looked older, tired, but her eyes were clear. She slid into the booth across from me. We looked at each other for a long moment, strangers who knew each other's deepest flaws. "Thank you for meeting me," I began, my voice formal. "Thank you for agreeing," she replied. She placed her hands on the table and I saw they were bare, no wedding ring. We didn't talk about the wedding, the lawsuit, or Daniel. We talked, awkwardly and with great care, about practicalities. I told her about the senior center, about the resources I'd learned of for new mothers. She told me about the prenatal care she was receiving through a state program. I gave her a folder. In it was not a check but information. Contact details for a reputable social worker, a list of subsidized housing applications, and the website for a scholarship fund for single mothers seeking job training. "This isn't help," I said as she looked through it. "It's information. The help is something you arrange for yourself." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know, that's what I need to learn." She took a shaky breath. I named her Clara. The sound of my own name, applied to this future child, stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't an olive branch, it was a grenade of sentiment. I had to steady myself against the table. "That's a big name to live up to," I managed to say. "I know," she whispered. We sat for another 10 minutes in near silence, drinking our tea. There was too much to say, and so we said almost nothing. When it was time to go, she stood. "I won't ask you for anything, Mom. But if you ever want to meet her when she comes, you can." It was an offer, not a demand. A door cracked open on her side with no expectation I would walk through it. "I'll consider it," I said, the words true. She left first. I watched her go, a solitary figure navigating the sidewalk with a new, careful gravity. Mr. Brennan joined me. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But it was clean." That night I took the music box from the porch and placed it on my dresser. I didn't open it. I took the green dress from my closet and hung it in the guest room. It was no longer a symbol of anything. It was just a dress, and the guest room was just a room. The war was over. What remained was not a perfect peace, but a precarious and honest truce. The landscape of my life was permanently altered, scarred, but stable. I had my home, my friends, my work, my hard-won peace. And somewhere in the city, there was a daughter who had finally stopped fighting me and started fighting for herself, and a granddaughter who would bear my name. I had learned to say no. Now I was learning the infinitely more difficult lesson of what a cautious, clear-eyed maybe could look like. The future was no longer a thing to be feared or financed. It was simply unknown. And for the first time in a very long time, that unknown felt like mine. Clara has found a fragile, arm's-length peace, but the arrival of her granddaughter, little Clara, will change the equation forever. Can a new generation build a bridge over the ruins of the past, or will old wounds poison a fresh start? The story of a family ends not with a perfect healing, but with the quiet, powerful beginning of something new and cautiously hopeful.